Welcome, YouTube family. Welcome to another edition of the Kevin Strong Show. And in this video, we're going to talk about the pension crisis in the United States. So, this is really good information. If you do have a pension, you want to listen up and learn some things that you may not be aware of. And if you don't have a pension, this still can affect you because as these pensions become insolvent, they're going to have to raise taxes to make their obligations hold. And who do you think they're going to come to get that money? So in this video, we're going to talk about some pensions that are really, really bad, some that are a little bit better than others. We're also going to have a heat map that I'm going to show you that basically shows state by state, based on a solvency, what pension systems are a little bit stronger than others. And then finally, I'm going to talk about an article my friend Mr. Hamilton gave me from the state of Ohio that talked about how Ohio's pension is actually tied to Russian investments and how that could potentially be a problem for that pension. So without further ado, let's get into this. I really think this is going to be a good one. I did this about a couple years ago on Facebook. Didn't get that many views, but it's definitely important. And I think it's something that's worth talking about now. So let's get into this right away. Every state's pension is basically in a crisis, probably with the exception of maybe two or three. I'll get into that a little bit later in the video, but please keep in mind there's very few pensions, state pensions in the United States that are actually 100% funded. I know sometimes you folks who call these people and they tell you, don't worry, the pension is funded. You don't have to worry about anything. You're going to get your pension for the rest of your life. They're lying to you, homie. Trust me, I've spent a lot of time and research doing this. They are flat out lying to you. And I'll get into that a little bit later in the video. Just to set this up, some of you may not be aware that pensions actually need about a 7% return to keep funding the obligations that they have to pay out to all of the people who are currently drawing on the system. One of the alarming things at the beginning is that in our current environment right now, there's not a lot of people going into these type of jobs like teachers and firemen and police officers. So what's happening is that you don't have a new crop of people funding this system, and the system in most cases are top heavy. And what I mean by being top heavy is this. You have so many people that are retiring now. You have so many people, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that are retiring every year at the age of 65, if not sooner. And so these people are massively putting financial strain on some of these state pensions. So the payout is exceeding the inflow of people who are actually paying into the system. So it's only a matter of time before some of these pensions become insolvent. So let's really get into this because this is something that I'm very well versed in. Please comment. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe to my channel and like and share because you know I care. So let's get into this. As more and more Americans reach retirement age, an increasing number of people use their pension as their main source of income. Now, there's some people who have retirement systems like the Port of Seattle, which is in the state where I'm from, where they don't pay into Social Security. So in the event that their particular pension, which is solvent right now, became insolvent, there would be no backup plan because a lot of those folks who started early in that program, once again, like I said, they're not paying into Social Security. Pensions are retirement plans that guarantee incomes to retired employees. While pensions have become more rare in the private sector, governments still use them often. Okay, so here's some information. Nearly every state is facing a pension shortfall. States have a combined $4.2 trillion in pension liability, but less than $3 trillion in assets set aside to pay those pensions. Look at that right there. The typical state has enough money to pay just over 70% of its pensions. Okay, so I'm going to drop down here and talk about some of these states that actually aren't doing too bad. This article, I think, was back in 2019, so it kind of changes the order in terms of how solvent a pension is from one category to another. South Dakota at this time, I think in 2019, was considered almost 100% funded, but it still shows a total pension shortfall of 2.3 million surplus, the only surplus. Okay, government workers as share of total workforce, 15.6%. Okay, so here's the average annual payout per public employee, about $21,000. Let's move down to number 49, New York, where I came from before I came to Washington. Good old Tennessee, down south. We'll just leave it at that. Tennessee's all right. I'm just joking. But as you can see, funded ratio 97%, 1.1 billion shortfall, second smallest shortfall, right? So it's almost funded, but it's not funded. Okay, and the average pension payout here is 17,000. Wisconsin, they're normally in the top 5. They do a pretty good job, but once again, this is a moving scale at 96.5%. And the state of Washington is at 94%. So very solvent, but showing a 6.0 billion shortfall, 17th smallest. But if you call the state of Washington, they tell you they've got a surplus and they got all this extra money. So like I said, they're lying to you, homie. So let's look at a couple more. And then I'm going to go on to a heat map that kind of shows you guys state by state what pensions are a little bit stronger than others in terms of financial solvency. Idaho comes in at 45, Nebraska at 44, and North Carolina at 43. And rounding off the top 8 is Utah at 85.2%. So let me do this heat map for you guys right now. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see here. And I really want to bring this up because this is a really good map that I found that I think you guys will find quite interesting. And there we go. Okay, so now let's check this out. So what this is an aggregate state-funded ratio for statewide public pensions from 20 to 21. So I'm going to scroll down here, and as you can see, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's color-coded. We're going to go from the left to the right. And the left, the green area, that's pensions that are anywhere from 90 to 100% funded. Okay, and then you can kind of look at that self-explanatory. As you go from left to right, you get down to like almost like a salmon color or a dark red color. That's less than 60%. But here's the alarming thing. We've been on an economic bull run since 2008 in the stock market when the Fed had started quantitative easing to stop the financial system from collapsing, which is basically what it did. And ever since then, thereafter, the stock market has pretty much been on a tear. Housing has been on a tear since then, but it really didn't start to pick up steam till about 2012. And I know that's the case for the Seattle area. The Seattle area was flat between 2008 and 2012, and then 2012 thereafter, the greater Seattle housing market just exploded. But getting back to this map situation, as you can see here, Washington from 20 to 21 stayed the same. But as you look at the map, what's interesting is that because the stock market has done so well, there's a lot of states that weren't doing that well in 2020 that are doing substantially better or did substantially better in 2021. So let's just take, for an example, without getting into all the states, let's just look at this blue area, okay? And look at all this blue here. And then when you go to 2021, a lot of that blue turned to green, which means it's more solvent, which isn't actually a good thing. So from a novice standpoint, the typical person would look at something like this and go, wow, this is really good. But here is what's alarming. Here's where people who just look at this map on the surface miss the most profound point. When something can change that drastically from 2020 to 2021 in the positive, it can also change just as drastically in the negative from year to year. So it doesn't take a long time for something to be really, really solvent and move all the way down here to this dark yellow where it's at 60 to 70%. That can happen in 24 months. Just to give you guys a little history, back in 1929, when the stock market crashed, those people who had their money at the top of the market, when you adjust what they lost to include inflation, it took those folks 30 years to get that money back. Okay, let me say that again. So let me explain it to you this way. If in 1929 you had $100 and the stock market went down and your $100 went down to $20, so now you're behind $80. When you factor in how long it takes you to get that $80 back, when you factor in inflation, it took almost 30 years. A lot of people are predicting that we may be on the brink of going into another recession, which I think clearly will happen by the end of this year, in my humble opinion. This is not financial advice. Some people are a little bit more dire with their prognostications and think we could potentially hit a depression. In the event that that happens, either one of those, it's going to put tremendous strain on all of these pensions because, like I said at the beginning of this video, you don't have that many people coming in paying into these systems, but you have a massive amount on the other end of it that are retiring, that are drawing from it. So what these politicians are probably going to have to do is reach out to the general public and raise their taxes or raise property taxes. You see where I'm going with this now? So it does matter if you have a pension or not. It does matter because it affects you either directly or indirectly. People don't have that much extra money as it is when you're looking at the economic landscape of inflation and rising prices of food and energy and gas and rent. And then now your property taxes or other goods and services they may tax to make some of these pensions solvent. So there's a lot of people who are basically delusional, thinking that their pension is going to be there, because that may not be the case in certain states. Just imagine back in 1970 when you had Chrysler, Ford, and GM, the three big automakers, which was probably the mecca center for automobile manufacturing in the world. If you would have told those folks that a couple of those big auto dealers would have, manufacturing companies, their pensions would go solvent or they would go bankrupt 20 or 30 years later, they would have thought you were crazy. It can happen. Blockbuster went out of business. Kodak didn't evolve into the digital age. They went out of business. These things can happen, but I think the reason why so many people don't want to hear about this information is because if you don't have a backup plan and you have all of your eggs in this proverbial pension basket and it starts to unwind, you really, really, really put yourself in a bad situation. So finally, as promised, I'm going to share this article with you that deals with, like I said, Mr. Hamilton gave this to me. This is an Ohio State pension fund that's investing in Russia. Okay, so all the stuff that's going on in Russia right now, they can't diversify and get that money out because everything is locked up. So let me see if I can pull that article up and show that to you. And that'll be the last one that I talk about. Let's see here. There we go. All right, that should come up. All right, here we are. Ohio's pension funds want to diverse from Russia. The question is how? So this money is stuck over in Russia and they can't get it out. So when Mr. Hamilton shared this information to me, my mind started to thinking immediately, what other kind of dicey or unscrupulous investments are some of these pensions involved in that we're not even aware of? This is only the tip of the iceberg, but I digress. So let's look at this. Ohio's 5 public pension systems, which collectively have more than $210 million invested in Russia assets, are considering how they can get how they can get rid of their holdings, how they can get out of that. Right? Because that money's tied up and they can't extract it out because the Russian economy is basically imploding. So there's a lot of freeze on things over there. The ruble was imploding. They basically have cut down or have actually shut down the stock market over there for a couple of days. It's a really, really sad situation. So here we go. Holdings and Russian interests held by these 5 pension systems. Ohio Public Employee Retirement System. They basically call that OPRAS for the acronym. They've got 110 million, not looking good, out of 123 billion portfolio. State Teachers Retirement System, into this Russia stuff. School Employees Retirement System, into Russia for 42 million. The teachers were in for 50 million. First responders, here we go. Ohio Police and Fire Pension Fund, $6.5 million out of their 19 billion of the portfolio into the Russian economy, and they can't get it out. And last but not least, Ohio Highway Patrol Retirement System, no direct investments in Russia holdings, but has 1.6 million in co-mingling funds, which basically means they're involved in it somehow, some way, indirectly, but they can't get this money out. Once again, this is really, really alarming because this only came to surface because Russia has invaded Ukraine. I go back to the point I made earlier about this particular article. What else are some of these pensions investing in that the members don't know about? But once again, when you call and you inquire about the solvency, you're gonna get the 5-star treatment. Oh, everything's fine, Joe or Jane. Our pension is solvent. You don't have anything to worry about. We're actually thinking about increasing it. So let me finally end up with this note. Turn here. Listen to me, guys. These pensions need 7% per year in order to keep funding it. If we go into a recession or a depression, and we're in a situation for a long period of time, let's say 5, 6, 7 years of a bear market, and these pensions can't get a sustainable 7% return on those billions of dollars to keep funding the pensions, it won't take long for a lot of these pensions to basically become insolvent. It's possible. Keep your head on a swivel. More importantly, always come up with a backup plan. Always find ways to supplement your income. Don't assume because you don't have a backup plan that you allow that to cloud your mind, especially when you start doing your own research and finding out some of these pensions just simply are not as solvent as they're telling you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment, like, and share because I care. This was the Kevin Strong Show, and this video was about the pension crisis in the United States. And I'll see you in the next video.